What we would like to demonstrate in this video is that the existence of our universe means that God must exist as well. We will use an argument that is commonly known as the Kalam cosmological argument. The argument is as follows.
Premise 1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence. Premise 2. Our universe began to exist. Inference 1. Therefore, the universe has a cause of its existence. Conclusion. The cause of the universe must be a being outside time with all knowledge and power. Obviously, as soon as you hear an argument like this, you immediately think of ways to defeat it. Ways to say that the conclusion that appears to be reached by the argument is not logically valid and is not truly reached by the argument. The idea is that the argument falls short of its conclusion. These take the form of what we will call defeaters of the argument, and we will look at 10 of these defeaters and see if they truly do defeat the argument.
Defeater number 1. Who says the universe has to have a beginning? I mean, couldn't time have been going on forever? Can't there be like an infinite number of previous days before today? Couldn't time be like a number line? You have positive numbers going forward to infinity and negative numbers going backward to negative infinity. The short answer is no. It doesn't make any sense for time to have been going on forever because time isn't like a number line. It moves from previous day to later day. What that would mean is that today would be the day at the end of forever. That a sequence of events, A, then B, then C, all the way to infinity, and now we finished infinity. And that doesn't make any sense. It's logically absurd for time to have been going on forever. Defeater number 2. This is the idea that the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument is not true. Now, to remind ourselves, the first premise is simply the idea that everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence. Is not nothing creating things. That obviously can't happen. Nothing doesn't do things. It has no properties. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a thing that simply began to exist and just did not have a cause that made that happen, that caused that to happen. So what we mean are uncaused beginnings. Now, uncaused beginnings really are just uncaused events, just an event that took place, that occurred without a cause. Now, the uncaused event itself, the beginning, the event, cannot be caused to happen. That's what we call analytically true. That just means that is in the nature of something that happened without a cause, is that it cannot be caused to happen. What that means is that it cannot also be caused to happen in a certain way. So what I mean is that if I bake a cake and you do part of the work and I do part of the work, then we both created or caused the cake to exist. But in the case of something coming from nothing, we tend to think, well, maybe something could come from nothing and something else could kind of adjust how it comes from nothing and kind of put rules on that. That, in essence, is not coming from nothing, because when you adjust and allow something to happen, you play a part in the causing of that. What that means is that if something begins to exist without a cause of its existence, then its existence is based solely on itself, and that nothing can really affect whether or not it can be. It is what it is because of itself. Therefore, a thing, or uncaused events, or uncaused beginnings, are unstoppable forces. So we run into a paradox issue. Let's say a universe begins to exist, and the rules of that universe are such that everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence within that universe. Then let's say that a bunny rabbit wants to pop into existence in the universe, or a Tyrannosaurus Rex, or what have you. Now, if this thing, the bunny rabbit or the T-Rex, wants to pop into existence on its own, uncaused, then we have a problem, because the rules of the universe are such that everything that exists in it has to begin to exist for a cause, and the bunny rabbit can't be prevented from existing because it is what it is because of itself. Nothing can affect its identity or what it is because it begins to exist without a cause, therefore it is what it is because of itself. Nothing can come in and co-create it, because when you say what you allow to be created and you control the way in which something can come from nothing, you are in a sense a creator. So what we have is an unstoppable force meeting a movable object. The bunny rabbit or the T-Rex is the unstoppable force, and the immovable object would be the universe. What this means is that we have a dual omnipotence or unstoppable force paradox. In other words, you can't have an unstoppable force meet an immovable object. That's a logically absurd idea. That makes as much sense as saying I'm a married bachelor. That makes as much sense as saying that two all-powerful gods exist and they both fight with each other. That can't happen. That's not a logically valid idea. That's just a meaningless scramble of words. It's like saying 1 and 1 equals 35. It's just a meaningless jumble of words. And so it is very clear that everything that begins to exist has to have a cause of its existence, because if it wasn't the case, then unstoppable forces could meet immovable objects.
Defeater number 3. You can't prove God exists. It's a matter of faith. This is a dumb idea that Christians use to escape having to give any reasons why they believe what they believe. If faith means believing in things without proof, then how do you decide what to have faith in? Because there are lots of things that don't have proof. Defeater 4. Why does the cause have to be God? Couldn't it be a lot of different things? We don't know everything that we would like to know about this cause of the universe, but there are some things we can determine from what we do know. And what we can determine is that this thing must obviously be timeless, because it creates time, it causes time to exist. The question becomes, is this thing a thing or a being? Something or someone? Imagine that it is a thing, that it is something. If it is, then whatever it does is based on what it is. It just has the properties that it has, and those properties are what causes whatever it causes. Now, if it is timeless and it causes based on what it is, then it will always be what it is, and it will always be causing what it causes. So therefore, the universe would be continually beginning to exist. And the universe itself would therefore be timeless and not exist inside time in such a way that time can move forward for our universe. Therefore, for the universe to be something different from the timeless thing that must cause it, the timeless thing must have the ability of concept or idea or thought to conceive of something and cause that to happen, instead of just being what it is and causing what it does. The further question would be, is perhaps some being can exist outside of time that's not an all-powerful God. The reality is that if you are a being outside of time, then you can see all times at once. Time is not a factor for you. You would be omnipresent in time, which means that you could be omnipresent in space, which would mean that you can be all-knowing because you view all things at once, which would mean that you know how to do everything. So, yeah, it could be someone other than God, but it would be someone all-powerful, all-knowing, and omnipresent and existing beyond time. Defeater number 5 is the B theory of time. Now, the A theory of time is the theory of time that you probably think is how time works. But there is a possibility that time doesn't work the way we think it does. The B theory of time is problematic because we don't really understand even what it would be.
but we just know that the A theory has some problems. The basic assumption of the B theory of time is that time is an illusion and there is no actual time that's true for all moments, for everyone, for every observer at all places at once. Rather, it's based on how you view things, and you view time in your way and someone else views time in their way. The issue here is this is not all that relevant to the argument. Time still would exist for me in my world, and it would still be a phenomenon that I experience. If it's not true in all reality, that's not a whole lot different from this idea that we're already talking about with the argument, that I exist inside time and there is a level beyond time where time does not exist, where God exists. Defeater number 6. Everything has a material cause. There are no non-physical causes. Now, the problem with this defeater is that it is a bare assertion, that it doesn't recognize the force of the argument. The force of the argument is to prove that there are non-material causes. Sure, we haven't seen one yet, but the point of the argument is to demonstrate that there has to be one. That is what this argument is trying to prove. So by saying that there are no non-material causes is essentially the same thing as saying this argument is wrong because it's wrong. Defeater 7. Logic can't prove something exists, only observations can. The interesting question about this is that you have to ask yourself, how does somebody even know that based on observations? This statement that logic can't prove things exist, only observations can, is a statement about how reality is. And it's not based on observations. They're basing it off their reasoning. It's called shooting yourself in the foot. Defeater 8. You can't create without time. Causation requires time. The problem here is, again, does causation require time? The force of this argument is to demonstrate that maybe it doesn't. That's kind of the point here. How do we know causation requires time? Perhaps something can exist outside of time, and if it did, its causation would be very different from everything we observe. And we know that the universe had to begin to exist and that it had to have a cause of its existence. So therefore, something has to happen radically different from everything we observe in the physical universe. In addition, William Lane Craig likes to point out that we observe things that happen temporally equal or at the same time in our universe. For example, a mountain with a house on it causes the house to be held at that point in the sky, even though they are both happening at the same time. Defeater number 9. Nothing ever begins to exist. Matter is neither created nor destroyed, and everything that exists is just a reassembling of the old matter. It's the idea that all of the old skyscrapers that have been torn down have been made into new skyscrapers because we just melt down the steel and redo it. The problem with this is that we know logically that time has to begin to exist. So again, this defeater, like the last one and number 6, makes the mistake of thinking that the argument is wrong because the argument is wrong. It assumes that the argument is wrong based on what we generally observe. But the point of the argument is that the beginning of the universe has to happen and has to be radically different from everything that's happening inside the universe. Defeater 11. Aha, we have observed things coming from nothing. What's being said here is that the first premise of the argument, the idea that everything that begins to exist has a cause of its existence, is not always observed for our universe. That we observe things happening without a cause of their existence. Obviously, if we did, this would be a major blow to the first premise of the argument. But aha, there's the problem. The first premise of the argument is based on pure logic. Therefore, saying that we have observed things coming from nothing is basically the same as saying that we have observed that 1 and 1 do not indeed make 2. If someone told you that a scientist somewhere observed that 1 and 1 indeed did not make 2, you would go check out that science. You wouldn't just assume, oh yeah, they definitely observed that. Therefore, we should be doubtful of such an observation. And in fact, if we go and do the research, we find that what is observed is not understood very well. It's not a thing coming into existence from non-being popping into existence. Rather, it's a very disordered state emerging into an ordered state in atoms and molecules. So go to the actual scientists. Don't just take mixed up versions of what they have to say from someone who wants to prove this or prove that. Go and find out what they have to say. Go and, in other words, go and look up the quantum mechanics and understand it. Don't just say that a thing has emerged from non-being and popped into existence out of nothing.